Oh my gosh, I need background music. uh, uh, hide that quick. How's it going? It's quiet in here. Okay, there we go. Five Nights! Let's try, we're going to Five Nights. But first, I want to ask everyone a question. Because I'm now, like... I don't know, I feel a little lost. Let's say you guys, let's say you guys get a straw. And you know that straws come in, like, wrappers, right? How do you guys open straws? Because what I do is I normally, from both ends of the straw, I pull, and the wrapper comes off, and then I have the straw. But I also know that there's, like, the people who will, like, just tear off the tip, and then, like, undress the straw. And then you also have the people who will, like, hit the straw against, like, a table. Until, like, the straw, like, pokes out. But recently, my strategy of from both ends just pulling, I don't know if I'm strong or I got like crazy gorilla grip, but I've been tearing the straw clean in half. Hit it against something, you squish them into the middle so that both the ends are loose and just fling off. Okay, that... Rip in the middle. Yeah, Scrubs sounds good. Scrubs, that's probably one of the best. Okay, so I'm just curious, because I'm starting to wonder if, like, maybe my way of going about all this is wrong. Maybe I'm weird for just, like, ripping these straws in half. I need to be more gentle with straws, but I don't know how. Like, now I'm trying to think of, like, how to best, like, open a straw, and, like, I don't know. Just, like, deep in thought on this. But we're not here about talking about straws. I just wanted to bring it up. I just wanted to ask. I ripped my straw in half earlier today, and I had no straw, so I had to suck, from the lid's, like, you know, like, the grip hole. I had to suck from its grip hole. So, hello everyone, welcome! My name is Grief, and I need to learn about Five Nights at Freddy's, because I don't know a lot about it, even though I played all the games. Not all. I haven't played through all of them. In fact, there's actually a lot of games I haven't played, as we found out on the Five Nights at Freddy's tier list. We'll get to all those another time. First, we're gonna learn about the lore. This is important. So, this is going to be, according to, like, this combined video, it's going to be about an hour and 26 minutes. We might have a break in between, and we'll be pausing it just to, like, just to, like, suckle on our knowledge that we have, so we understand. We're watching lore? Yes, we're watching lore.
Today, we end the torment. 19 books, 11 games, 8 whole years, all leading to this moment. The ultimate FNaF timeline is finally complete. The pieces are in place for us. Now, all we have to do is put...
Is this lore video still accurate?
this story of tragedy, jealousy, and loss back together.
I'm still gonna use it and just assume.
Welcome to Game Theory, a show that feels like a kid revealing the class project that he's been working on all year. Except here, it's the class project that I've been working on for the past decade of my life. This one is big, my friends, and I gotta admit, kinda nervous. I haven't attempted a timeline video on this franchise since 2018, back in the days when Mike was the crying.
Hold on, wait.
Attempted a timeline video on the...
What is... Oh, that's Pizzeria Simulator. Hold on, is Ultimate Custom Night an actual game? I thought it was like a fan game. Is this real? Does this have anything to do with the plot?
This franchise since 2018, back in the days when Mike was the crying child. Afton coming back was actually a surprise, and Fazgoo wasn't a phrase I'd ever thought I'd have to utter. But since the last time I did something like this, we've had 3 more massive games, the death and revival of the FNaF movie, and more robot kids than you can shake a staff bot at. It is exhausting trying to keep track of this whole franchise, which honestly is why I'm here today. The lore at this point is complicated. It is full of speculation and theory, so to hopefully make it a little easier for everyone and to give us all a baseline to talk about this franchise moving forward into the future, it's time to reveal my current working FNaF timeline. But just before I do, I just want to explain a couple of things. First, this timeline is massive. Seriously, it is huge. This thing towers over any video project we have ever done on the channel. But when you look at the totality of this franchise, the story of FNaF really boils down to the story of one man, William Afton. His successes, his failures, his rise to becoming co-owner of one of the most successful restaurant franchises in the world, and his eventual fall to the monsters he helped to create, only to then be reborn in a new digital form later. That's why I've decided to split this timeline into 3 main chunks. The foundation of Freddy's, how the business started and how it came into being, the Afton era, William's decades-long murder spree, and post-Purple Guy. Basically...
Oh, do we need... Yeah, we're gonna keep closed captions on. So, like, I'm aware of, like, Afton. Is this gonna go over... It might be in the later videos, they'll go over, like, the Mimic, because I think the Mimic is where I am most lost. I kind of understand most of, like, Five Nights at Freddy's, like, 1 and 2. And Sister Locate. I understand, like, those. But I don't understand, like, the one where you're a child in the house. FNaF, I don't understand
everything that happens after the Pizzeria Simulator fire. And because there are lots of new big revelations in this thing that seemingly come out of nowhere, as well as just points I want to talk about further, I decided to dedicate 1 episode to each chunk. I originally wanted it to be one seamless, continuous video, but it just felt incomplete without some sort of explanation at the end of each one. Once this whole thing's done, I promise I'm gonna merge all the narrative bits into one massive video so you can just skip my explanations. But for now, this just felt like the best, most satisfying, most complete way to do this. That being said, this is still about the story, the broad strokes of the franchise. So in order to make sure that you guys know that I'm not just pulling answers out of thin air,
I'll wait for it.
Am I discussing some more
who is that purple hippo that I keep seeing everywhere? Ever since you guys got on me about saying I didn't like the purple hippo, he has been popping up in my feed non-stop like an Annabelle doll from a horror movie. He just, every time I change to another, like, YouTube video, it's this purple hippo, and I like try to switch off of it quickly because I didn't want to be like explained to until I played the game. I try not to like ever look into anything I don't know until I play it.
Controversial bits at the end of each chunk, we're also putting in a handy little graphic in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, which will show thumbnails, video titles, books, and any other citations that we need throughout the video.
Into the pit.
So if you wish to understand that specific statement in more detail, you know exactly where we've taken it from. That way you can look into those details for yourself.
Hippo, I like
so sit back, grab some popcorn, or your pitchforks if you're the type to get upset when I say something controversial, and make sure that you subscribe, since this is going to be a video that you're going to want to come back to a few times.
I am subscribed already, and I'm going to leave a like. I haven't seen it yet.
In order to fully dissect. Without any more waiting, I present to you the story of a loving, obsessive father who slowly descended into madness, and along the way, discovered the secret to eternal life.
Not Edwin.
Our story begins not in the 1980s, or even in the 1970s, but all the way back in the 1930s. It was the throes of the Great Depression, and people were in desperate need of cheap entertainment, especially in Utah, one of the states hit hardest, fourth highest unemployment in the nation, and full of transients. People looking for work in Salt Lake, finding none, and ultimately moving on to find their fortunes out in California. People were tired, and
My
they were
family's from
hungry,
Utah.
but as they traveled, there was one thing that could lift their spirits. A simple roadside attraction called Fredbear's Singin' Show. The ads were plastered all over town, featuring an animated bear drawn in the popular
Five Nights at Freddy's takes place in Utah?
pie-eyed cartoon style for characters at the time. He resembled cartoons like Mickey Mouse, Felix the Cat, Betty Boop. It immediately said that
That's my whole family's from
Fredbear's
Utah.
was a place where you could bring the family. And the price, honestly, couldn't be beat. For 50 cents, you could get food and entertainment as you watched the local trained real-life dancing bear perform on stage. Normally, you only got to see dancing bears at large traveling
Oh, that'd be
circuses
sick.
like Barnum and Bailey, where the tickets would go for about $1. That's $1 without food. But
An
this
actual
was
bear?
a smaller show, like the type from the Von Brothers or the Robbins Brothers, where tickets would sell for just a mere 50 cents. Watching that bear do tricks on stage brought a glimmer of joy at a time when so much was wrong with the world. The simple show would go on for years, bringing happiness to hundreds of travelers passing through looking for a quick meal. But it left a permanent impression on one little boy, capturing his imagination in a way that nothing else had.
Oh, it would be a real boy
That
because
was
this
his
is
nickname, at
this
least,
is
but his
1930.
parents
They
liked
didn't
to
have
call him
robots.
William Afton. The bear could dance, it could sing. For decades, William dreamed of recreating that moment of bringing a musical bear to life, but how? William was smart, without a doubt, and he had a keen mind for business, but he wasn't the most creative. How do you make a singing, dancing bear come to life? The best he could do was using rudimentary costumes.
Or else
William
King
was inspired by
Greaselord,
the
yeah.
work of Walt Disney, who throughout the 50s and 60s was pioneering the use of mascot suits throughout his theme park. The big innovation?
Right.
Suits with 5 fingers. This allowed the performers wearing the suits to use their natural arms and hands to interact with the guests, as opposed to the older models where the arms would just hang limply by their sides. Finally,
What?
with a simple
Is that-
mascot
hold on,
suit,
is that
he'd be able
real?
to realize his childhood
Wait.
dream. He would be able to bring Fredbear to life. To appeal to the kids,
Was
and
that a
for
step
copyright
forward?
reasons, he changed Fredbear from a realistic brown animal to a cartoonish yellow bear with a purple hat and bow tie. But feeling like one character wasn't enough,
But
he
Freddy's
added
not yellow.
another friend, a yellow rabbit with a purple vest and matching tie named Bonnie the Bunny. While Fredbear was certainly his first love, Bonnie was extra special because
they're the
that was
same
his.
color.
It was an original character that he had created from scratch, and I do mean scratch.
I don't know if that means
Williams' hand-sewn
anything.
costumes were rough with seams and stitches visibly showing, but it was the best that he could do. And you know what? It was just enough. Bonnie and Fredbear would perform on stage to small but enthusiastic
They're both
crowds.
yellow with purple
Finally,
bow
he was able
ties.
to
I never
deliver
realized that.
fantasy and fun to all the kids, delighting and inspiring them in the exact way that he had been delighted and inspired
watch
so
this.
many
It's
years
driving me
ago.
crazy.
And
It's
things
too fast
could
and
have ended
police
there.
related.
That could have been the end to his story. It could have been perfect had it not been for one thing. Other people saw the success of his idea and they wanted in. Enter Chica's Party World, a rival restaurant starring performing animal characters. His idea,
Chica!
except they did it better. William may have been the
And she
first,
was
but
hot.
obviously he wasn't the best. It hurt the prideful William Afton to admit it, but this restaurant was able to do the thing that he always wanted to do: make the animals actually come to life. All of the performers in this restaurant were robots, simple metal skeletons that were powered by battery packs, but all of them able to freely turn and talk and dance on their own, no human required. It was like magic. Magic
What?
that came from the
Really?
mind of a brilliant creator named Henry Emily. This Henry, in some small way, had been able to harness the power of life itself. Afton admired him. He was jealous, to be sure, but he also looked upon this man with awe. Off to one side of Chica's Party World was a small cabaret stage featuring an elephant magician. On the other, a hippo known to ramble on
It's
and
that POS that keeps popping up.
on. That one was more of a joke for the parents, but it was the main stage that was for the kids. A rocking band of characters featuring a yellow chicken thing with a southern drawl named Chica, backed
That's
by a
horrifying.
band of other country-themed characters, including a pig with a
I
banjo,
don't like
an
that.
upbeat frog from the local swimming hole,
hold on, go
country-themed
back.
characters,
His eyes are blue and green like the tiger.
including a pig with a banjo,
That's gonna
an
be
upbeat
important.
frog from the local swimming hole, and a brown bear with a heavy southern accent. Wait, A bear? But bears were his animals. Why not a cow or a horse? Something to fit the country theme a bit better. Why'd it have to be a bear? And adding insult to injury, they had the
later,
nerve
scrubs.
to call this thing
Thanks for stopping by.
Ned Bear, a direct copy of his own Fred Bear.
Ned Bear, can you get away with that?
No, that was not okay. Afton's jealous admiration turned to hardened bitterness. A bitterness that would only grow over the next couple of years as families continued to choose Chica's party world over Fredbear's.
So
William
Henry's
just couldn't compete with the appeal of the robots.
Henry's a
Eventually,
bad
his
guy.
restaurant would go bankrupt, only to get bailed out by, of course, Henry Emily. Another insult, another humiliation that William wouldn't soon forget. 1979. Despite being bitter, Afton couldn't deny that what came next was
So
a
they're both
period of
evil.
massive success and expansion. With the two franchises now merged into one, it was the best of both worlds. Afton's ideas with Henry's robotic expertise. The two men decided to launch under a new name, Fredbear's Family Diner, a pizza chain that would eventually come to feature a mix of humans in performing suits as well as on-stage animatronics. They decided to stick with Fredbear as the headliner, considering the yellow bear was easily identifiable as a brand and because he was the original performing animal mascot. Afton appreciated that. This new restaurant would also see a mix of characters as the two franchises merged into one, with Pig Patch and Happy Frog performing right alongside Fredbear and Bonnie. And as part of this one big Fredbear family, they even got themselves official merch that were released, ranging from masks to magnets.
The crappy Mr. Hippo fridge magnet?
I'm sorry, Gregory.
That said, not all the characters were winners. The reception to some characters was just mediocre, so they faded away into the dumpster, storage units, and retro budget tech stores of lost nostalgia, waiting for their chance to step back into the limelight if and when a headliner went out of commission. Others, though, would fare much better, like a new pirate fox, as well as a blue guitar-playing variant of the yellow Bonnie Bunny. Ultimately, the franchise would get so big, it would spawn its own cartoon show, Fredbear and Friends. Business was booming. In the end, Fredbear and Bonnie's popularity would be so strong that they would be able to support the Fredbear's Family Diner franchise all on their own, while also spinning off a new sister location dedicated to their friends. In 1983, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza launched, giving a dedicated home to all this new supporting cast of characters. Chica the Chicken, Bonnie the Blue Bunny, Foxy the Pirate, and of course the headliner, a brown Freddy Fazbear. Business was good, and Afton was happy, mostly. It did bother him that the one original character that he created, the one that he himself played, Golden Bonnie, got passed over for inclusion in that cartoon show. The only character in the roster of regulars to get ignored for the show, but other than that, things were going smoothly. He had himself a wife, two sons, a daughter, he had a thriving business, and best of all, he was able to learn the craft of robotics from the man that he both loved and hated, Henry. Together, they were constantly pushing the limits of what these characters could do. Because it was quick and easy, new characters introduced into the roster would be given a simple hand-sewn suit with 5 fingers that any performer could wear. Eventually, Henry would design one of his signature animatronics for that character, utilizing a divided mouth with either a hinged or sliding jaw design. This was the first generation of animatronics. But why stop there? Afton had big ideas. What if the animatronics weren't just locked to the stage, but could freely roam the restaurant and interact with kids? What if his mascot suits could become
nice to see you, Malicious Gamer. Thank
What if you could use more than just rigid metallic skeletons? Why not experiment with tubes and wires that would give the animatronics fluidity and flexibility while still providing structure?
Oh, they are different.
The possibilities for this technology were endless. Afton fell in love with robotics. He had started with a dream of bringing one simple singing bear to life, but with robots, he had stumbled across the tools that gave him the ability to control life itself. And thanks to Henry, he was practically speedrunning his way to an engineering degree. And while William wouldn't admit it out loud, one other thing that kept pushing him forward was the desire to beat his former rival, to prove himself smarter and more capable, to surpass the man who everyone else considered to be a visionary genius. But pride cometh before the fall, and tragedy was about to strike. Okay, so that brings us to the end of part 1 of the story. That said, at the end of each of these chunks, I want to break down some of the logical leaps that I made, since the more narrative format doesn't give me much of a chance to justify a lot of the big decisions. And admittedly, there are some large leaps. Let's just start off with Fredbear's Singing Show, shall we? We know, based on the retro poster that was hidden in Security Breach, that at least at one point, Fredbear was an actual bear. And like I called out in that narrative segment, dancing bear shows were a real form of entertainment. The only problem is that, timing-wise, none of our main characters would be the people in charge of that business in the 30s, and a series of pizza restaurants in the 80s without him just being extremely old. Best case scenario, if Afton's running the singing show when he's 18, that still puts him at nearly 70 when the first pizzeria opens and his murder spree begins. That just doesn't make a lot of logical sense because he doesn't become immortal until his first death in Springtrap. That's why I suspect that Fredbear's singing show was either a...
Okay, right now, Afton actually kind of looks like the good guy, and what's his name? Henry looks like the bad guy in this.
family business that Afton then carried on
like
to a new
I get it right
generation,
now.
or something that he
I'd
saw
be
as
pissed
a
too
kid
if
and
someone
just wanted to
made Ned
recreate
Bear.
when he grew up. The Fredbear Singing Show thing also starts laying the groundwork for some of the core elements of this story, that Freddy's was a place of fantasy and fun, and that Afton, despite eventually falling to become the heartless serial killer and mad scientist that we know him as, began as someone with good intentions and a love
Am I
of
playing the
entertaining
Lego
kids.
movie after
He
this?
wanted
No,
to
we'll
bring
play that
things to life from the
maybe
very
in a
beginning,
couple weeks.
a theme that recurs a lot for him throughout the rest of the franchise. Next up, let's talk about those mascot costumes. One thing that I keep going back to is the design of Glitch Trap. It's a handcrafted suit. You can see the seams and everything. It even has 5 fingers for the performer's hands. It is very much not
They don't
a
have to keep giving him that
Springtrap
pose.
suit. This is something much more rudimentary. It came at a time before animatronics were a part of the story. That's why I suspect that it was actually the first, predating literally everything. It's
How?
also
Because, like, Afton's just, like, wanting to... He just wants to follow his dream, and, like... He made these, like, 2 original characters based off, like, his childhood memories. And then, like, some dude came in, was like... That he didn't even know, it was just like, cool, I'm gonna do that, but better. And he just started, like, making a bunch of stuff. And, like, I guess he bailed him out, which is, like... It's very cool of him, and maybe there's, like, some communication between the two, or like maybe Afton, like, I don't know, like punches like people he passes on the street every now and then and doesn't get caught. But like right now it just seems like Afton's a chill guy, like just trying to do his dreams. And slowly this random guy is like, no, I'm just gonna torture this guy by stealing his dreams and making it better.
also a suit that is very personal to Afton. He put his digital consciousness in that form. It's his personal avatar. It's the way that he sees himself. There's also a whole separate discussion to be had here about the habits and rituals of serial killers. So the fact that he's choosing to lure kids and kill them in this particular suit actually says a lot about his emotional
Okay, that doesn't speak to his, like, good character in any way.
attachment to it. So while Fredbear seems to have started as someone else's creation, Golden Bonnie was uniquely Williams, giving him a personal connection. And that's not all. In this whole franchise, only one set of characters have themselves 5 fingers, the Nightmares. Even Golden Freddy,
Really?
Fredbear was a 5-fingered wearable suit at one point in the story, as we see in this shot from the graphic novel, before he, like everyone else, was turned into an animatronic. This seems to imply that all of the main characters had similar wearable mascot outfits at least at one point in time,
Ew.
and that whoever is having the FNaF 4
I wanna see that.
nightmares, if they even are nightmares, something that we'll touch on in part 2, saw those mascot suits specifically. Lastly, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. The literal elephant, Orville Elephant, as well as the rest of the mediocre melodies. For a while now, I've suspected that the mediocre melodies played a much more important role in the story than
don't.
just being a bunch more animatronics to fill out the roster. Especially Ned Bear, which is just so suspiciously close to Fredbear. And yet, there are 2 key details that we're gonna have to justify with any mediocre melodies mention. One, they're very rudimentary with external battery packs, implying that they come very early in the timeline. And 2,
When he talks about Glitch Trap, it's wrong because this was before Rune came out, so he had no idea the Mimic existed. Okay, so this isn't going to go over the Mimic at all. We're going to have to find a whole nother video on
we
explaining the
know
Mimic
that
lore.
at minimum, Mr. Hippo does eventually become an official member of the extended Freddyverse. But
Foxy!
if these are supposed
That's
to be
Foxy!
cheap, generic rip-offs, why would you be trying to rip off yourself? You wouldn't. You would be stealing someone else's ideas. So if Afton created Fredbear, there would have to be some rival franchise. The only other person who would likely be ripping him off? Henry. We've talked extensively about how the mediocre melodies are clearly Henry's design aesthetic, so it just has to be him. I don't think Henry's doing this maliciously. He doesn't strike me as the type. He was likely building the robots at the orders of someone else that was running a rival restaurant franchise. But that's enough motivation to start Afton down a path of jealous rivalry, but also begrudging admiration. As the Freddy Files Ultimate Edition says, it's important to revisit the beginning of Henry and William's relationship, so here you go. I think this is where it begins. Also, this is future Matt Pat here coming back to add this one in. Seems like the recently released character encyclopedia has backed up all of this speculation. I've had this timeline written for about a month now, but I've also been holding off off a bit to see what wrenches this character encyclopedia might throw into it. And on this particular point, I gotta say, it seems like we might actually have nailed it. They actively call out the suspicious similarities to the main Fredbear crew. Quote from one of the pages: Ned Bear looks like an imitation, altered just enough to avoid copyright issues.
That wouldn't avoid.
That seems to imply that we were right on the money. Knowing all of
that
this,
is just
at one point,
copyright.
the franchises had to have merged. That's really the only way that you get Mr. Hippo from the rival franchise as part of the Fazbear crew. This also mirrors a lot of what happened in the real-life history of Chuck E. Cheese, with two rival restaurants, each with their own casts of characters, merging to become one unified brand.
Wait, what were those? Are these
two rival restaurants, each with their own...
Who is Pasquale? Pasquale looks terrifying. I kind of like Helen. Mr. Munch. Mr. Munch is how I feel if I eat too much food.
Casts of characters merging.
Oh my gosh. Oh hey, that's the king cat. That's
unified brand.
That was Scrub's
we've gone
character.
into that in detail with other videos, just wanted to remind you all of that here. But why would I call out the rival restaurant as being named Chica's Party World?
This live stream's gonna get DMCA.
First, we know for a fact that a location named Chica's Party World exists. It is mentioned in the source code teasing sister location, so it is out there somewhere and doesn't fit cleanly anywhere.
Hi, Bob
Second,
the Fishing
in the story
Boo.
of the Puppet Carver, Chica is very
Welcome.
explicitly looped in with the book version
Chuck E. Cheese robots
Big
were always
Patch
too
and Ned
spooky.
Bear, implying that
I
she
didn't know they were that
started
spooky.
as a mediocre melody. Thirdly, her design just fits better with a theme of down-home country animals with southern accents playing the banjo and eating with bibs.
And
With
she's
her being
hot.
the headliner of the show with her name on the restaurant, it would make sense then that when the restaurants merged, she was the one that was added to the main cast of characters while all the other mediocres faded away. It's also why when Freddy's close...
Hold on. Chica is also yellow with like purple writing. So like you have Freddy, who's yellow with the purple bow tie, Yellow Bonnie, who's yellow with the purple vest, and then you got Chica, who's yellow with the purple writing.
Closes after William's killing spree, she's
That's
the
gonna
one
be
to branch
connected.
back off into her old franchise and is therefore missing in sister location. A detail that's bothered me for years at this point. It might also explain why William decided to stuff his first dead kid into Chica. That one was Henry's creation, not his. Is all of this a big leap? Yeah. Is it connecting a lot of dots that are very spread out across
Are
the
there
franchise
kids
that
inside
I've
the
been holding
robots?
on in the back of my mind for years? Absolutely. But I think it makes sense. It also serves as a clean answer to a lot of the random threads that Scott's been leaving dangling for years. So with all of that in mind, my friends, we can close
Don't
the
know
book on the
Pasquale?
foundation
No.
of Freddy's. And don't worry, next week I'll be back to give you arguably one of the most confusing parts of this entire timeline situation. Part 2, the Afton era. I promise, it will actually be next week this time. No more waiting around. I am just as eager to get this one out the door as you are to watch it. I promise. You know what else I promise? I promise that we'll actually get to talking about the games. I would have liked to have talked about them in this episode, but there just isn't that much in the games that helps us depict anything pre-Family Diner. Although, let's be honest, this franchise has never been just about the games anyway. Even back in the early days of FNaF, we were decoding images and source code that Scott fed us through the website. The modern day books and the clues that we get from those things, now they're just modern extensions of that. All of
Yo,
it
that
is
mermaid
crucial
kinda
to
bad.
understanding this franchise and its lore. Unless,
baddie
of
to anyone
course,
else?
Steel Wool finally gets around to making that Fredbear's Family Diner game they want to make so badly.
I've always would love to do is get kind of back to. I have no clue if we'll ever be able.
Okay, so he's just gonna go over that stuff. Let's go to part 2. So right now, my opinions is I forget his name again. It is Steven is a bad guy. This guy is a bad guy because he's just kind of, and it doesn't seem like he's doing it maliciously. He is just like creating stuff, but like at the end of the day, he is still just stealing all these ideas from like the original creator Afton. And Afton hasn't seemed to have done anything wrong right now. Also, I didn't know there were children
Hello,
inside the
Internet.
robots. I
Well-
thought it was just the spirits inside the robots.
Welcome to Game Theory,
Part two.
and officially page 7 of the FNaF timeline script. Last time we covered the origins of Freddy's. We talked about William Afton's childhood dream project of making a singing bear come to life.
Chica's party world is the Chica and the Secret of the Mimic. And Henry made Chica, which means he worked with Edwin.
And the infuriating moment that his dream is copied by a
Oh.
rival restaurant franchise looking to brilliant Saturday morning cartoon shows, toy lines, and spin-off relics, opening his eyes. That was his cord from here on out in the story. Because with
we go.
life, there is inevitably death. something that Afton would become intimately
Henry Emily,
familiar
thank
with.
you.
But before
You're gonna need to
Afton
type that
acquaints
in,
himself
like,
with
5
death,
more
I
times.
want you to take some time to acquaint yourself with our newest channel. Guys, this is a huge moment for us theorists. For the last decade, we've had this history that fashion for your luxury, and the way that all of that is
we're aware of their new
this is what science
style
already.
channel. I say
It's
new
also
in
the channel where
quotations.
we're gonna also preference whether five men start their chameleon world series time.
Hold on, let me leave a like. I don't know if I'm gonna like this video, but we're gonna leave a like regardless.
1983, business was booming with 2 whole restaurant franchises running: Fredbear's Family Diner and the newly opened Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Together, William
Henry
and
Emily.
Henry
All
had
right,
been able to
4
take
more
the
times you're gonna need to say
hybrid
that to
suit
me.
idea and make it into a reality. They called their new invention the Springlock suit, and fittingly enough, it was symbolic of the partnership between these 2 men. A human suit as designed by William that could become a freestanding Henry-style robot. But because it was still new tech with kinks to work out, the rollout was limited, restricted only to the Fredbear's Family Diner location. All of this meant that William was busier than ever. He didn't have time to be a full-time parent, so he designed a nanny cam system where cameras and speakers were hidden throughout the neighborhood, as well as in his youngest son's favorite toy, Psychic Friend Fredbear. I mean, plushy Fredbear. But since cameras just weren't enough to raise a kid, he also left childcare duties to his eldest son, Michael. There was just
Michael
one
seems like a
problem with
good
that.
guy.
Michael was far from the best babysitter. He
never
tormented
mind.
his younger brother by jump-scaring him with a foxy mask and constantly left him behind. William watched all of it from his cameras. Kids would be kids. Tomorrow was another day, after all. Except Michael's torment didn't stop. Bitter, angry thoughts would run through Michael's mind. Why did he have to be the one to take care of this whining crybaby all the time? It just wasn't fair. It was time that he got even with his brother by playing the ultimate prank. A prank that just so happened to be on this crying child's birthday. He and his friends would take his scared little brother and make him do the one thing that he was terrified of doing: getting close to the animatronics.
No, this is actually like normal Big Brother behavior.
His brother squirmed, screamed, kicked, and fought, but just as they were putting that small, squirming boy up to Fredbear's lips, the mouth snapped shut. The sensitive spring locks inside the body had been triggered.
Okay, maybe that's not typical Big Brother behavior. I didn't... So, like... Is that the bite of 87 that I keep hearing about? So he dies, and I guess he goes into
by the boy's movements, and they'd immediately clamped down.
Oh!
The wriggling stopped. The boy went limp, but it was just a prank. It was meant to be funny. The boy was taken to the hospital and was immediately given an IV. Flowers and pills filled the nightstand next to his hospital bed.
Oh, he's alive.
The damage was too severe. He couldn't recover.
Oh,
As
he's
the younger
dead.
brother's consciousness began to fade, he could hear Michael's last words, a small and flimsy apology. But his father, Williams, through the voice of the Fredbear plush, were a firm and committed promise to a dying son. You're broken. I will put you back together. This would not be the end. No matter what, Williams' son...
That line goes really fucking hard when you're a robot builder. Like, he's about to make this child into Inspector Gadget.
Would live again. It would just take time. Time that, right now, he just didn't have. His young son's heart
Go, Gadget! Freddy punch!
The inky unknown of the afterlife. In the aftermath of the tragedy, changes started happening around the restaurants. Kids were now required to wear security wristbands
Technically, it's
to
the
prevent
bite of
anyone from
83.
getting outside without
Is there a
permission.
second
Any
bite?
kid who approached the exit without permission would have to answer
The
to
same
a
part
security
isn't.
puppet. A marionette...
What? Hold on, the bite of 87 was me. What the f... God, close the mouths! Bar them! Put the Hannibal Lecter mask on these dudes. This is unsafe. Did we have, like, a safety practice back then?
On strings that could fly around on rails across the restaurant to stop kids in their tracks.
Oh,
It was
that's
Williams'
cool.
idea, inspired by Michael constantly leaving the restaurant without his brother. In the wake of Fredbear's Springlock failure, all the hybrid suits were getting retired, locked away at the nearby Freddy Fazbear location.
Makes
it was
sense.
yet another tough pill to swallow after all the hard work that he and Henry had put into them. William would eventually bury the boy's small body in a remote location out in the woods right alongside his drive into and out of work every day. The
He died?
death of this little boy sent the family spiraling. His wife, crippled with grief, was so distraught that all she could do was sit and watch TV. But his son Michael was far worse, complaining of seeing hallucinations of a golden bear standing outside of his window. The boy was so racked with guilt that he was convinced that he was being haunted by the ghost of his brother stuck inside the suit that took his life. The suit's three-toed feet digging into the wet earth. The words "It's me" ringing through Michael's ears. Some nights Michael...
Okay, so this is the Nightmare one. This is Five Nights at Freddy's whatever, the house one. Okay, that's actually kind of cool. That makes me want to play the game.
would even go so far as to break out of his room to check the gravesite and ensure that his brother was still there. As for William himself,
you just dig him up and put him back
disappeared into
in?
his work and his drinks.
Still there.
Junior's, the local bar, wasn't far from his son's gravesite. He found himself going there more and more frequently, spending longer and longer amounts of time there. The bar gave him a place to think, to remember, to reflect and stew on how Henry had stolen his idea for an animal-themed restaurant. How they'd cut his character out of the cartoon when everyone else was there. How Henry had humiliated him by buying him out of bankruptcy. And now there was his son. Henry had taken his son from him. The robotic part was the part that failed after all. William ordered one more drink, but it was one too many. The bar turned him out and told him to go home. But William didn't go home. Drunk and angry, William raced back to the restaurant to give Henry a piece of his mind, only to find someone else waiting. Henry's daughter, Charlie, locked outside of the building, bullies laughing at her through the window. Fine, some other
He's going to
problem
kill the
fix.
child.
Then Afton got an idea. A beautifully awful idea. This was his chance to get back at the man that had humiliated him all those years ago.
This is wrong. William is using hallucination gas. William. Which one's William again? William Afton. Okay, yeah. Afton is using hallucination.
Henry had killed his business, and now Henry's robotic suit had killed his son. It was time for William to do some killing of his own. Let Henry feel what it's like to have something you love get ripped away. While parties continued inside the walls of the pizzeria, William attacked Charlie in the back alley. It felt good. He felt free. The years of resentment and bitterness trapped in his heart finally released in a moment of pure unapologetic evil. He would make Henry hurt like he hurts. And in that moment, William became a killer. He dropped Charlie's lifeless body and drove home, forced to confront his family problems later that night, appalled, but also a little excited by what he had.
So this is just another case of, like, if there was a single therapist that existed in this world, I don't think there would be bad guys. And that's just like most superhero movies. I feel like if therapists were, like, a more common job, it wouldn't happen as often.
Just done. Charlie's death would
or like,
remain
you know,
on the books as
the
a
conflicts
random
wouldn't
act of
happen as
violence.
often.
And though Henry had suspicions about William, there was no physical evidence, nothing that could link him back to the crime. In the weeks that followed, Fredbear's family diner would close for good. 2 high-profile deaths around the restaurant with 2 grieving owners in such a short period of time was just too much bad press to handle. Besides, Freddy Fazbear's was still open, and it was the newer restaurant anyway. All the equipment from the diner, including the old yellow suits and security puppet, would get retired to that location, and there they would sit for 2 uneventful years. The rest of 1983 and 1984 were spent quietly grieving. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and the new cast of characters were a hit. Tragic memories of their yellow predecessors quickly faded.
After these videos, can you watch Are the Withereds and FNaF 1 animatronics really the same? FNaF Theory by Terminal Error.
Kept a low profile and buried himself in
We'll see how long this takes.
Quickly reaching
we might have to
Henry's
push it off to
level of
another day.
engineering and even surpassing him. And while Henry slowed down to grieve, Afton kept going, even starting his own company, Afton Robotics, for all those pet projects that were a little bit too experimental for the regular operations of the pizzeria. The first of these experimental projects was a secret workshop under his house, a veritable bunker, which allowed him to work while still monitoring his
Wait, hold on, whose is this?
Going, of engineering and even surpassing him. And while Henry slowed down to grieve, Afton kept going, even starting his own company, Afton Robotics, for all those pet projects that were a little bit too experimental for the regular operations of the pizzeria. The first of these experimental projects was a secret workshop under his house, a veritable bunker, which allowed him to work while still monitoring his kids via hidden security cameras.
Oh, this takes place in his house.
198 a passcode that served as a constant reminder of why the cameras were so important, why he was down there in the first place. This was all to fulfill the promise that he had made to his son, right? I will put you back together. This was for him, all for him, right? But cameras weren't enough. He needed to solve the runaway Michael problem. He had to keep him in the house. He couldn't have another one of his kids wind up dead inside of an animatronic suit. So why not run a little experiment on Michael? You see, all this work with Henry had gotten after
what's he gonna do?
About life, robots, the human mind, and what a fallible machine we as humans were. Our reality is so easy to manipulate with a few sensory deceptions. Deceptions like sound. With just a few sounds, he had discovered that he could alter a person's vision. He could transform blank smooth plastic robots into lumbering, twisted nightmares. Nightmares far scarier than he could create with actual materials. They would appear organic, rotting, putrid, terrifying. These would be his means of keeping his son Michael in the house where he belonged. Was it extreme? Maybe. But then again, this was the boy who had killed his son. He would make him sorry. And so Michael would grow up not only dealing with the memories of his own guilt, the hospital room, the pills, the flowers, the death of his brother, but also facing literal nightmares, illusions created by sound. Michael would never forget these either. Years later, as a security guard, he would still draw pictures of them inside of his logbook. But all of these extra projects meant that his home life suffered.
Oh, this is the same Michael we play as. The bullies who we play as in the Five Nights at Freddy's game. I didn't realize that. Okay, but like, so Afton's mad at Michael and Hank for like everything, and he's trying to go after both of them, I think. But like, man, why is he going after his kid so harshly? Why isn't he just like dealing with him in like an adult way, like a parent? Maybe he's just fucked up in the head. He did kill a child, so.
Even more. He was an absent father and a non-existent husband, leaving his wife cold and alone.
Why do you hide inside your walls?
That's Ballerina.
There is music in my halls. All I see is an empty room. No more joy, an empty tomb.
And despite her repeated demands that he leave his office and engage with the family,
That
he
is
refused
so cool. Yeah, except for the
time
child
and time
murder
again,
part.
leaving her no choice but to leave.
You burned down my house?
You call that a house? It was like a morgue in there. You need to see your son.
The baby isn't mine.
Well, how's this? I'm keeping the diamond ring.
And through it all, there was one lingering feeling. William wasn't done. He had gotten a taste of what it felt like to be unleashed, what it felt like to be free. Charlie's murder had unlocked something in him, and he wanted more. June 26th, 1985. Putting on the golden Bonnie suit, he lured children one by one to the back room of the pizzeria when no one was looking. At first, he was cautious. He would lure them with promises of cake and cookies. He told them that their dog had died. He would ask for help with homework. Susie was the first. You never truly forget your first.
I was the first. I have seen everything.
But where to hide the bodies? He couldn't sneak out. Someone would see him. He had to hide them in a place where they'd never be found and where they'd never leave the building. They had to be stuffed inside of the suits. No one maintained those things anyway except for him. And so Susie would go
so they
into
are
Chica.
actually...
Fritz, Jeremy, and Gabriel would come next. But it was easy. It was too easy. And with each little life he snuffed out, his lies got bigger. Their house was burning. They're just being kidnapped. Until the last one where all pretense was off. He let himself get violent. Too violent.
I'll just wait for him after school, throw a bag over his head, hit him with a shovel, and drag him into the back of my car.
The body of Cassidy was far more bloody and broken than any of the others. He
Cassidy
let himself
Foxy.
go too far. That one he shouldn't have killed. With no more active animatronics left, he shoved the body into the one suit that remained backstage. The long-forgotten yellow Fredbear, now broken and discolored with age. Broken, like Cassidy was broken, like his son was broken. Newspapers reported on this disappearance, naming the whole thing the missing children's incident. Police would even charge William with the crimes after finding security footage of the golden mascot suit luring kids to the back, but they couldn't convict him. They had no bodies, and his face had been hidden behind the mascot suit the entire time. What they had was circumstantial at best, and so he walked away a free man. But Henry knew the truth. In these murders, he saw his daughter Charlie all over again, so he threw Afton out of the company and shuttered the doors to the old pizzeria. Henry would keep the franchise quiet for 2 years. This would not happen again. This could not happen again. How could he protect the kids? Finally, he developed a solution. He would implement an even more extreme security system in the form of new animatronics. Toy animatronics, inspired by the toys that they had been selling.
Fuck this one. And this one for different reasons.
Years ago. But these guys, these were special. They were a new breed of robot with facial recognition abilities.
But most importantly, they're all tied into some kind of criminal database so they can detect a predator a mile away.
All the original animatronics, now withered with age, were moved to the new location. With a plan in place, it was time to try once more. The year was 1987, and the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was making headlines in local newspapers. Headlines that just so happened to catch the attention of William Afton. Freddy's was back, and without him, that was his idea, his character. Henry was, yet again, trying to cut him out of the picture. No. As long as these restaurants stayed open, William would always come back. Then he noticed the the phone number to apply at the bottom of the article. $100 a week to apply, call. Afton would go back, not as an owner or co-founder. He would go back in the one place that they would least suspect him, a lowly day shift security guard. And there it was.
Oh, so you
buried
played
in
as
the back of
Afton in
parts and
Day-
services
in
mixed
second
in
one.
with the old withered animatronics was the golden rabbit. With the
I thought
yellow
you played as
security
Michael
badge
in
still on his
all
chest,
of them.
he used his crank to pull open the spring locks. It was time for Bonnie to give an encore performance.
Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. Now none of them are acting right. From what I understand, the building is on lockdown. No one is allowed in or out, especially concerning any previous employees. When we get it all sorted out, we may move you to the day shift. A position just became available.
1987, 5 more.
Divided
kids.
87.
He didn't know what felt better, getting back into the suit after 2 long years of waiting, or knowing how devastating this would be to Henry the next morning. He didn't even try to hide his crime this time, just meant more blood on Henry's hands. He'd failed to protect the kids again. The restaurant had only been open for a few weeks, but William was sure that this would get it to close. Good, if he couldn't have Freddy's, no one would. Whenever a new pizzeria opened, he would be there. But as he sat in his bunker, something else started to linger in William's mind. He had seen something strange. The old withered animatronics, they had been wandering around the building,
That's
spurred
right.
on by the puppet. It
You
was
see
almost like those old robots were trying to save the kids.
You see the broken
Save
ones.
them? They couldn't, obviously, but still, how were they moving? It was almost like they had been given life somehow. Did he have something to do with that? The following day, the news would report a security guard getting bitten by one of the animatronics during the day shift. Was that bite meant for him?
That's the
William's
bite of 87.
curiosity was stronger now than his bloodlust. He had to learn more, but how? There was no way he'd ever be able to get inside another Freddy's pizzeria.
It's a reaction
Heck, there was
channel now.
practically no
Yeah,
way
hold
a
on, let
Freddy's
me-
would ever open again. He needed to create something new, something brand new. He needed
Oh
to
my
create
gosh!
his own pizzeria.
Due to the massive success and even more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was
No, this isn't a reaction, by the way. This is more of like, I need to know the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's, because I have no idea what happened in The Secret of the Mimic. And I don't think this is going to get me any closer, because from what I understand, the Mimic isn't mentioned in here. But I assume there's going to be a video that talks about it sometime that we watch.
It was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
Circus Baby's Pizza World. This would be the place where he could continue his work. No longer just murdering, experimenting. He needed more kids, and he needed them alive. And knowing that he couldn't show his face on the restaurant floor, he needed a way of remotely capturing his victims and preserving them for his work. With that goal in mind, he designed a new breed of animatronic. Their endoskeletons
It's Funtime
were
Foxy!
flexible. He equipped them with sound lures that could mimic voices. They could isolate children. They could incapacitate and contain them with zero direct input from him. It was brilliant. He was brilliant. Far beyond the simple bars and wires of Henry's designs. And the characters he chose for this were uniquely his. His new roster wasn't going to be tainted by
They were
Henry's
good.
disgusting barnyard bird. Instead, it was back to his characters, his creations. Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, as well as 2 special ones. The first, Ballora, was an homage
Ballerina.
to the woman who left him. Now she would never leave him again. The second, the titular baby, was designed with his baby in mind. Elizabeth, his youngest child. She would always be Daddy's little girl, the one that listened to him, the one that obeyed, until the day that she didn't.
Daddy, why won't you let me play with her? She's so pretty and shiny.
She's so pretty.
Didn't
Oh
you
god,
make
she's
her
British.
just for me?
The day
I didn't
before
know she was
Circus Baby's
British.
Pizza World opened, she disobeyed. She didn't listen. Left alone with Baby, she got too close. The animatronic ripped in half and swallowed her whole. The child fading into eternal
Forgot about that.
half and swallowed her whole. A scared and confused child fading into eternal darkness. By the time Afton found her, it was too late. She was gone. He immediately canceled the launch of Circus Babies under the guise
The
of a
fucking
guest.
claw!
Wait, as he sat there at the foot of the stage, he noticed that something was different. The eye color of the robot had changed. Baby had been built with blue eyes, but now they were emerald green, the same color as Elizabeth's. Was she in there? Could this all be connected to the free-moving animatronics that he had seen at Freddy's? He had to know more. His mourning turned to excitement. He had had to return to where it all
Are
started.
you laughing at her? She didn't die from that. She got sucked into it. She died after.
This place was pathetic. Henry had clearly tried to reopen one final time with those old original animatronics from so long ago, but William's damage to the brand had been permanent. These things stank of death. They hadn't been washed in decades. But even if they had, nothing could wash away the stink of murder that haunted these halls. One night, then
throw them
another,
away.
Then another. William repeatedly snuck into the old broken restaurant to lure the living animatronics to him, one by one dismantling them, robbing them of their endoskeletons. The metal had to be the secret. It had to contain the remnants of life itself. But he had to know for sure. Leaping out of a room that was invisible to the animatronics programming, he dragged the oversized robotic skeletons back to his underground workshop, back to where Circus Baby watched on with glowing, curious eyes. Eyes that somehow felt alive. Not knowing what else to do, William melted the robotic parts down. 5 animatronic endoskeletons reduced down to one silvery puddle of goo. Could he transfer this living metal to his own creations? He had to try.
Oh, is this
He picked up a syringe and filled it with the molten metal and injected the goo into Funtime Freddy's twisted, wiry endoskeleton. And suddenly the...
Oh my gosh. I've been wondering for so long what the heck this thing was. I didn't know what it was. So this is an amalgamation. He melted all of them down and fused them into one. Okay, see. That's actually a good idea because now we only have to deal with one serial killer robot full of the murderous soul of a child.
Coils came to life. Like snakes writhing in a pile, what had once been cold, lifeless metal moved and jolted on its own. He'd done it! He had unlocked the secret to life itself. Except something was clearly wrong. The movements were erratic. They were violent, angry. Baby didn't
fighting
act
for
this
control.
way. She had been calm, collected. This was clearly something else. Something mindless and frantic. Perhaps by mixing the souls and then portioning them out, he had created incomplete beasts. He would need to keep testing to truly understand it. He needed more of this remnant. As he searched the old pizzeria one more time for any remaining scraps of metal, the ghosts attacked. His past victims come to collect their due, all led by Cassidy. The 5 lined up and blocked the door, and Afton's mind reeled. The scientific implications of this were incredible. Ghosts, real ghosts that he could see, all standing against him. But what could they do? What couldn't they do? He panicked as Cassidy approached. How do you stop something that's already dead? Maybe with the thing that resulted in their death in the first place. He would get into his suit like old times. He would regain his power over them just like the day that they died. He was the genius. He was the one in the suit. He was the one in charge. The spring lock snapped into place. Maybe it was his frantic movements. Maybe it was the leaky abandoned restaurant.
Ooh.
Maybe it was just fate coming to collect its due. He didn't know. The only thing he did know was that his brain was suddenly filled with searing white-hot pain as hundreds of metallic pins and gears stabbed into his body from all sides. All he could do was collapse, blood slowly oozing out of the suit and pooling onto the floor around him. It couldn't end like this. It wouldn't end like this. His work was unfinished. Unable to move, his only option was to survive, to live, to keep living. It took days lying in his own blood, but eventually someone found him, a security guard making a normal report. When he saw the animatronics torn apart in the middle of the party room floor, it caused him to file an immediate report of a break-in. An owner would have to come in and claim the damage, and who else would it be other than Henry? Hope jumped in Afton's heart. Henry would see him. They were partners after all. He would be the one to help save him, to get him out of this suit, to relieve him from this tremendous pain.
Oh, he's gonna leave him in
the
it.
Secret room. His eyes fell on Afton sitting there in the pool of red, and Henry, saying nothing, turned and walked away.
This is just to inform all employees that due to budget restrictions, the previously mentioned safe rooms are being sealed at most locations, including this one. Nothing is being taken out beforehand, so if you left anything inside, then it's your own fault. Management also requests this room not be mentioned to family, friends, or insurance representatives.
And so there Afton would sit, hanging on for 30 years, trapped behind the walls with an iron will that refused to die.
30 years? What is he eating down there? Is he like eating rats as they pass by?
End of this part. I say this part because it's not officially the end of the Afton era just yet, but this just felt like a really solid stopping point, and the episode has gone on forever. Okay, so most of this is things that we already knew, stuff that's been established and re-established time and time again by the games. That said, there are 2 things that I absolutely have to address. The first and biggest is the placement of sister location, or more specifically, Elizabeth's death. To me, evidence in game seems to suggest that it was meant to come before the crying child's death in 1983. The biggest clue clue to this is that the crying child saw something. Remember what you saw is the phrase that's repeated over and over again by psychic friend Fredbear, aka William Afton speaking through a walkie-talkie in the Fredbear plushie's stomach. But what did he see? Well, I think we can tell based on how the nightmare animatronics are visualized. They have mouths in their stomachs, just like Baby ripping in half at the waist to swallow a kid. There's also the empty girl's room, one presumably left behind by a dead sister. And lastly, it explains why he's scared, and more specifically why Afton wants him scared. He needs his kids to stay away from the animatronics. He doesn't want them getting too close because the last time one of his kids got too close to a robot, his daughter died. That's then why he sets up the nightmares, to scare both Mike and the crying child away from the animatronics from that point forward. That's why books like the character
is the crying child not the one that got put in the suit?
Encyclopedia outright suggests that we play as the crying child in FNaF 4. That's why he has a nanny cam following the crying child everywhere, so he can keep tabs on his kids when they're out of his sight. He can't let another Elizabeth situation happen. The death of Elizabeth also gives William Afton extra motivation for killing. He's a grieving father. His daughter was taken away from him, so Charlie should die as well. He's lashing out at the world after losing his kids. And again, we know that at least one of his children had to have died prior to Charlie's death, based on the mound of dirt that we see in Midnight Motorist. It also allows circus babies to open and close earlier in the timeline, which is how you wind up with Funtime Foxy appearing as Mangle in the FNaF 2 location. Basically, Elizabeth dying first has everything it needs to fit, except for the most important thing, the murder weapon. Why would Afton be building an animatronic with a giant claw in its stomach so early in the timeline? At this point, he just has no motive. It just doesn't make sense prior to 1983. At this point in the story, he hasn't killed anyone, and we know for a fact that the missing children's incident is 1985. So Elizabeth's death coming before any of those events just doesn't work. Hence why I placed it where I did in the narrative timeline. Afton's death here is also a bit tricky. We know that he returned to the FNaF 1 location to break down the original animatronics in order to harvest their remnant. We know that he melts down 5 things to become one.
So here's a cool, well, I'll talk about it after
makes
this
that
video.
Very clear. So the 5 things are the 5 endoskeletons from the various animatronics. That would be totally fine if it weren't for one huge problem. On his 5th visit to the pizzeria, Afton gets spring-locked. So either the 5 becoming 1 starts in 1993, but then finishes 30 years later when he re-emerges from the wall to add the last endoskeleton to his pile, or he's had himself some reason to return to the original location after harvesting all the stuff that he can. It's not ideal, but it's the one angle that makes the most sense. And with that, this next chapter comes to a close, thereby...
So is there not a Five Nights at Freddy's game that deals with ghosts? Because that seems like it would be a very scary game. Right now, the Five Nights at Freddy's games all kind of feel like they're trying to mimic the other games like Ban Ban and Poppy's Playtime and stuff like that. It doesn't... I don't know, like, I think seeing, like, you know, those two twins in The Shining, the come play with us, like, those two, like, that would be terrifying to see in a Five Nights at Freddy's game. Like, that they lead you to the lore. There's always these ghost children just running around scaring you.
By leaving us with 5 more games to cover and another 40+ years of Fazbear history to recap. Ooh, when you put it that way, something tells me that this might balloon into 4 parts. Ugh, we'll see. Anyway, until then, my Faz heads, congratulations! You've made it through a massive upload. And hey, if you are still looking for more to watch, then check out the other 5...
I'm ready.
Hello, Internet!
So we have one more after this.
Game Theory, and page 20 of our final FNaF timeline. This is getting ridiculous. Last time we covered William Afton's...
Okay, skip ahead.
William still wasn't...
Let's leave a like.
Back. Weird. Michael knew his father sometimes traveled for work, disappearing for days on end, but usually there was some sort of notice, a phone call, a post-it, something. It's not like Michael and his father were close, far from it, but as a household of 2 suffering men coping with years of tragedy and loss, there was at least some element of communication between the two of them. They were united by a name and a shared pain. This time though, things felt different. William had left nothing. His absence was longer. There were no check-ins, no updates, just silence. Something had happened. If there was one thing Michael knew about his father, it was that he had had contingencies, safety checks, backup plans. His father was a careful and guarded man. He
Was
held
he?
his cards close to his chest, and as such, William had prepared him in the event that something like this ever happened. Normally, his father kept his home office locked, but in the event of an unexpected, prolonged absence, Michael had been instructed to enter his father's office and look behind an empty set of shelves mounted in the corner of the room. Rolling his eyes, Michael entered the office. He never
Oh, is he
fully
gonna
understood
find
how
out?
William was able to spend so many hours of his days locked up in here. There was just nothing to do. Most of this place was empty. He dragged himself over to the shelf in the corner, expecting to find an emergency contact list, a family safety deposit box. But what he actually found there was completely unexpected.
The underground bunker?
It's me, Michael. I did it. I found it. It was right where you said it would be.
The shelf swung open and
Why does he talk
revealed
like
a
that?
giant industrial elevator, one
Yep,
that led
the bunker.
straight down into an underground bunker. But that was impossible. Hidden inside his childhood home was a secret entrance to an enormous underground science lair? It didn't make any sense. Seriously, it didn't make any sense.
How would
And
you
yet
dig that?
Here it was, mapped directly underneath
Yeah, that's
the floor
elaborate.
plan of the house that he'd grown up in, lost his brother in, been tortured in. Michael thought that he'd known his father, a prideful, sad,
So his dad, I'm guessing his dad the entire time he's like, listen, we gotta start drilling under this house and making this elaborate tunnel. So I'm gonna start, like, doing, like, some, like, weird scarecrow gas chamber, at night whenever my child tries to sleep. You guys are just gonna dig during that time. You guys have about 6 nights to build the entire bunker.
angry man with petty everyday problems, but clearly he'd been living with a stranger this entire time. His father had secrets. Suddenly, the days of William being locked inside of his office made sense. He'd been here
Here's
the
a
entire
list.
time. Where was
Thank you,
Hero?
EG,
Was this
for
Circus
the-
Baby's Entertainment and Rentals? The Circus Baby restaurant always did seem to be a deeply
Proof that there are no
personal
ghost
project
children
for
in the
father.
games.
A failure of his that cut
They should add
unusually
it.
deep, especially after that first location had to be closed prematurely due to the gas leaks. After that day, father really did seem to change, to lose himself even more in his work.
Thought he
Clearly,
was
the
quite
entrance he had
upset.
found was some sort of secret back way into the facility, one that required crawling through vents to navigate. His father had been working here, but in secret. Why? And that's when he found her. At the end of the facility, Circus Baby.
Oh, his sister.
father's pride and joy. Except something was different about her. She wasn't like the others. The way she talked, the stories she told.
Don't get
This
too close.
wasn't just a robot. She was alive somehow. And not only was she alive, she also felt familiar.
There is something bad inside of me. I'm broken. I can't be fixed.
I can
Will
fix
you
her.
help me?
Was this
Wait, she's
his
a child.
sister? William's baby
Take that back.
girl? But
Take that back.
how? Why? What was this place?
I'd like that
He
cut
dug
from the
around
record.
some old files and found blueprints outlining the features of these animatronics. Storage containers, voice mimicking, parental tracking. And
Ah,
was that
mimic.
a child in Freddy's stomach? Was his father collecting and experimenting on kids? Were all the rumors that he'd heard throughout his past actually true? That the animatronics came to life at night? That there were murders done in all the pizzerias? That his father had somehow been the prime suspect in all of it? Suddenly, Michael's mind flashed back to his persistent nightmares throughout his childhood. Had he been experimented on too? Tears stung in his eyes as anger, fear, and confusion filled his body. His father's secrets were pouring out. William wasn't just a lame, overworked father. He was a monster, toying with life itself. Suddenly, everything clicked. He frantically looked around the room, blinking human heads on poles staring back at him.
Those are-
Green eyes, his sister. Blue eyes, his brother. Closed eyes, his mom. All just staring, expectantly. These were meant to be human. William was working down here trying to make
Okay.
believable humans, literally rebuilding
Oh, hey,
the
it's Gregory.
family that they had both lost. The small little girl robots with their British accents roaming the hallways of this underground facility suddenly took on a whole new context.
I don't like that at all.
Were those meant to be his sister? A replacement for her? A clone? Was William building clones of his sister? They seemed to know him, after all, to react to his presence.
They were all there. They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you.
He always
Okay, so Afton is making robot children that act like what he remembers people acting like, and he kind of figured out that like you could put ghosts in the shells. Where Henry's kind of like, no, I'm gonna make a highly adaptive robot that is as close to human without actually being human.
always did have a bit of a resemblance to his father. Michael's mind reeled as the reality of his world
I think that's what
crumbled
I'm
to
getting
dust.
here.
No,
They
he
both have,
had
like,
to get
the
them out
same
of there.
goals.
If this really was his sister, heck, if any of these things were human, souls, whatever remnant of the humans that they once were, they needed to be rescued.
They always put us back inside. There's nowhere for us to hide here.
Led by the voice of Circus Baby, he marched through the now empty halls of the
I did
Funtime
that.
Emporium. He would lead them. He would protect them. And finally, he would be able to forgive himself for the killing of his brother so many years.
Ugh! Oh god, that still disgusts me.
You are in the scooping room now.
Ugh, I hate
The
that.
scooper only hurts for a moment.
Scooper? That violent extraction arm? Michael had seen that one in the pile of blueprints. Something about heat rendering the magical silver metal inside useless. In reality, prior to getting himself spring-locked and put behind the wall, William's methods had become increasingly sophisticated. With a mechanized arm that could infuse new bodies with a soul, William could finally give and take away life. The only thing he needed were the bodies. But William wasn't the only one looking for bodies, as Michael was about to learn.
But if we looked like you, then we could hide. If we looked like you, then we would have somewhere to go.
Michael was going to be the hero to help these animatronics, all right. He was going to help the haunted tubes and wires of these animatronics escape, just not in the way that he anticipated. His sister had lied to him. Another game of pretend. The scooper plowed forward, digging its extraction arm into
because
his
his
body. As he
sister
heard his
was
bones
watching the
ripping through his
father
flesh,
the whole
Michael
time.
blacked out.
She's also messed up.
Something's wrong with me.
Well, she's dead, he's gone.
I should be dead, but I'm not.
The
For
Purple
the next
Man.
several months, Michael's life was not his own. He was forced to comply with the tangle of wires and spirits that lived inside of him. His body felt like an overfilled balloon begging to burst as day by day, week by week, his flesh began to sag and discolor. He was a walking, talking, rotting corpse, alive, but wishing he wasn't. He was a puppet, a walking shell. And while he did his best to conceal his fate, there was only so much a man filled with robot spaghetti could do. The entity in his innards would eventually leave, but by that point, the damage had been done. His decaying flesh stank, turning him into a literal purple guy. But still, even with no bones, even with rotting purple flesh and begging to die, Michael continued to live. That silvery metal remnant injected by the scooper meant that he couldn't die. His anger also refused to die. What he had seen down there in his sister's location had rocked him to his core. His father had killed and captured dozens. His experiments had killed his sister and then tortured him throughout all his childhood. He was actively trying to build human replicants. He didn't know where his father was, but Michael knew that he was out there somewhere.
Hey kids, don't put your little brothers into animatronic heads. It doesn't end well. Even farther down the road.
Living in shadows. There is only one thing left for me to do now. I'm going to come find you.
Michael had to correct for the sins of his father. He had to make things right. Michael would burn Fazbear Entertainment to the ground.
Oh, this is just like
what
Star
else
Wars.
could you do when your skin was permanently purple? Michael's strategy was simple. He would apply for night security guard positions at the old defunct pizzeria locations. That way, no one ever had to see him or smell him during his shift. And all these old
because he gets
locations
fired
did
for
need
smelling.
guards. Teenage vandals and squatters were always looking to get inside these abandoned buildings, and yet no one ever really wanted to work an overnight graveyard shift unless they were practically out of options. Enter Mike. One by one, he would take on the job of security guard, changing his name each time to ensure that no one was able to follow his paper trail. Once inside, he could tamper with the animatronics and figure out how they worked, writing about his experiences in his security logbook. While there, he would listen to the old tapes where upper management awkwardly welcomed new recruits to their summer jobs, even though he was working there nowhere near the summer months. He heard the gory details of his father's franchise from the outsiders looking in, confused and afraid about what was happening in the walls around them. Sometimes he would see his brother in the form of the Golden Freddy suit. It's me appearing on the walls around him. Except now, there was something else there. He was no longer alone. Another angrier presence was also in the suit, as if two spirits were forced to share the same body. And Golden Freddy would attack him now. It was aggressive.
Why?
Its vengeance wanted to lash out at anyone with the Afton name, anyone who wore a security guard outfit. Over time, Mike worked his way through the old restaurants.
Because
the original pizzeria, the bigger, better Freddy
I get it.
Fazbear's. He spent weeks there looking for clues as to his father's whereabouts. And each time at the end of his week shift, he would then set the location on fire. Remnant can't survive high temperatures after all. So burning away whatever spirit-laden animatronics that still existed inside seemed like a winning strategy. All this revisiting of his past.
I didn't know he was the one burning them down. I thought it was actually
hallucinations
accidental
that brought brought him back to his childhood. The guilt around killing his brother. His dreams were oddly mixed with the shrill phone calls of the security guards. But it would all be worth it in the end. The goal was to eventually stumble across the one location, the one job that would finally reunite him with his father.
Snap his
did
neck.
Mike know that that day would come sooner than he expected. 2023, an advertisement came across Mike's TV. Fazbear Frights, a new horror attraction inspired by the awful crimes that occurred around Freddy Fazbear's Pizza so many years ago. It made Mike sick. People looking to make a quick buck off the tragedy of others, off his own family. This wasn't a joke or entertainment. Regardless, he had to be a part of it. If this team was combing through his family's history, they might stumble across something that could be useful. And if his father was truly still alive as he suspected, there would be no way that he wouldn't show up here. Maybe finally this could be the final chapter in his family's marathon of tragedy. Mike applied for the job and was immediately
5 Nights at
handed
Freddy's
the keys.
3.
Years of doing this had taught him that security
right?
guards rarely receive thorough security checks. They
Looks
also liked
human,
how creepy
yep.
Mike looked. They thought it was a costume on theme for
This is my application looking for a girlfriend, and even then, this is optional.
thorough security checks. They also liked how creepy Mike looked. They thought it was a costume on theme for the job. What little they knew.
Hey, glad you came back for another night. I promise it'll be a lot more interesting this time.
For weeks, there was nothing. But just as Mike considered giving up, he received the call that he'd been waiting for years.
You're not gonna believe this. We found one. A real one.
Could this finally be him? Sure enough, there he was. William inside his iconic golden Bonnie Springlock suit, only now it was green and decaying with age. And there they were, a small family of broken men
This game sucked, by the way. This was a terrible game. This was so annoying to record. Did I even release this, or did I private it? This might have been the worst Five Nights at Freddy's. It was audibly annoying to listen to.
finally reunited. It's been a long time, Dad. Mike had always struggled with the phantoms of his past haunting him, but now all the animatronics he'd encountered over the past months, hopping from pizzeria to pizzeria, suddenly sprang to life. Their burned faces haunting him as he tried to keep track of his father on the cameras. It would seem that William's mere presence had put the spirits on high alert. Ultimately, they were harmless, more annoying than anything else, but there was one that felt different from the others, one that was more than just a mere phantom. The security puppet. If he looked at the cameras at just the right moment, he could see it floating there through the halls. He could even see its reflection in the water pooled on the ground.
I don't like that.
It would seem like he wasn't the only one there on a mission. While he was dealing with Springtrap, Michael assumed that this one was likely dealing with the spirits of this place, finally setting them to rest. Hopefully this means a happier day for all of us, Mike thought to himself. And in that moment, he felt the air around him release, like pressure being let out of a bottle. The building sighed, as if 5 spirits had finally been allowed to move on. He had the sense that his brother was a part of them. He rigged the wiring inside the building to misfire, and the dry, desiccated walls erupted in flames. It is finished. Except, it was not.
Yeah, 5 more games
through
later.
Sheer force of will, Afton remained. He had survived, and Mike would need to find a new way of finishing off his father. Luckily, the solution would present itself later that year. Not from Mike, but from another victim that had been left in his father's wake.
We're talking about becoming a Fazbear Entertainment franchisee. Restaurant ownership and management. Something almost anyone can do with a limited degree of success. You are now the face of the newly rebranded Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
Fazbear Entertainment as a brand had been closed for years. William had been stuck in a suit and a wall. The only person who legally could bring the
Oh, and he renamed it that. He renamed it that because every time he used the animatronic or reused the symbology, Afton would always show back up. So to lure him there, he just had to name it that and then have someone to get a vaguely bear-related costume involved.
Franchise back was Henry, but he'd largely pulled out of the franchise around the time of his father's disappearance. Something was up.
Shout out to One-Eyed.
This had to be some kind of a trick, right? Mike, doing what he did best, applied for a franchise and immediately got the job. There was just one thing out of the ordinary. Paragraph 4.
If you are playing this tape, that means that not only have you been checking outside at the end of every shift, as you were instructed to do, but also that you have found something that meets the criteria of your special obligations under paragraph 4.
No employment contract he'd he'd ever signed required him to keep special lookout for independently moving animatronics outside
Damn.
the restaurant.
Shout
now
out,
he
my
knew
boy.
something was up here. Henry was luring them all back. Rather than trying to go to them, like Mike had done for years, Henry was doing the opposite. He was putting them all under the same roof. He was finishing them off for good. Mike knew this wasn't meant to be a restaurant. It was meant to be a prison, a containment vessel, a locked box meant to trap them all in so they could finally end the madness. It took a few nights, but eventually everyone was there. His father, the puppet, the robot Spaghetti that had once violated his body, and his sister, now hopelessly devoted to serve the man that had once gotten her killed. It was time. He had been instructed.
Okay, I didn't. The amalgamation, melted Freddy, whatever that thing is the spaghetti monster that was inside him. Got it.
To seal the doors
I
and
understand.
leave, but while he locked everything
I'm following.
down, he didn't move on. If this was truly meant to be the end, if the remnant needed to be washed away, he needed to be a part of that.
This is where your story ends. And to you, my brave volunteer, who somehow found this job listing not intended for you, although there was a way out planned for you, I have a feeling that's not what you want. I have a feeling that you are right where you want to be. And to you monsters trapped in the corridors, be still and give up your spirits. They don't belong to you. For most of you, I believe there is peace and perhaps more waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend.
And with that, it was
God,
over.
that goes hard.
The Afton legacy died with all of them trapped inside of a literal box.
There was fire coming out of the dude's pen while he was writing that line.
As the flames danced around the office, Mike, for the first time in decades...
FNaF 2 is your
was
favorite
happy.
game, the
But
FNaF
William
game? How about
wasn't
mine?
gone yet. Although the darkest pit of hell was open and waiting for him,
Here's a list of my favorite Five Nights at Freddy's games. If we're talking about classic Five Nights at Freddy's, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is the best of all the Five Nights at Freddy's. And when you're referring to just like the classical Five Nights at Freddy's. But then whenever it comes to like when they started doing the Poppy Playtime open world thing, I think Ruin is the best. Ruin is actually genuinely a fun game to play over and over again. Whereas these are like really cool ideas. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 and 4 suck. Back to the video.
for him, something or someone wouldn't allow him to move on. Instead, he found himself locked in moments from his past. The pizzeria, his son's room, his underground bunker. It was as if his brain's neurons were all firing at once, overloaded, mixing and matching all his biggest fears.
I love
regrets,
FNaF at Freddy's too.
What was this place? How did he get here? He called out into the silence. Then
Jesus Christ, why is he screaming
Without
that?
warning, animatronics, both new and old, began to jump out at him, bite him, rip him limb from limb. The pain was immeasurable. Make it stop. Make it stop. William, for the first time, longed for death, an end to this torture. Just as it felt like he couldn't take it anymore, everything was quiet again. It was as if the world had been reset. There was a brief moment of quiet, and then the onslaught began again. Dozens of faces from his past, all focused on him. A waking nightmare that he couldn't escape from. More pain, more ripping. It was his own personal hell, but why? Why couldn't he just die? And then he saw them.
He's
A group
immortal.
Of characters he never thought he'd see.
It's that purple hippo again.
Stolen characters that had started everything. The mediocre melodies. It had all started to go wrong once they showed up. Once Henry had made them. But mixed in with their obnoxious southern drawls, William heard something else. It was barely a whisper, but he could just make out the words.
He tried to release you. He tried to release us. But I'm not gonna let that happen. I will hold you here. I will keep you here. No matter how many times they burn us.
Jesus.
That voice. He knew that voice, but from where?
Greetings from the fire, and from the one you should not have killed.
The one he shouldn't have killed.
All of
William
them?
thought back. He'd done a lot of awful things, but there was always the one that stood.
It's the Batman meme of, you killed my father. Do you know how little that narrows it down?
Out. Not Charlie, his drunken act of revenge. Not Susie, his first true murder. No. Instead, it was the one that he had lost control with. The one that he had broken beyond repair for no good reason other than because he could. The
Oh,
one
Shovel
that he'd
Boy.
stuffed inside the golden bear that his partner used to wear. Cassidy. They were back, and now they were trying to punish him, to make him suffer like he'd made them suffer. It was almost like William and Cassidy's souls had been locked together, fused by a collective rage and spite, each refusing to move on. But while Cassidy was so focused on taking revenge, they actually did the one thing that would be the downfall for so many others. years. They kept William alive. Even though fire should have destroyed the remnant that was coursing through his being, Cassidy kept William breathing, paving the way for his escape. William's will was so strong, his soul so powerful.
So he
that
hides
managed
in
to
like
put
the
a part of
power
himself inside
box.
the circuitry that housed the spring-lock suit, and there his consciousness lay inside a single circuit board, waiting for someone to find him and set him free, a person that no one would suspect. Okay, so a bit of a shorter chunk, but an important one as we shift perspectives to Mike and tell his side of the story. And with FNaF VR, AR, and Security Breach having so much to explain, I didn't want to rush through things by trying to cram it all in here. Don't worry, I know you've all been patient. The final video is happening on March 25th.
Okay, we'll just move on to the part 4. Finale. And this is Ultimate Custom Night, which I haven't played Ultimate Custom Night. Is this something I should hold off on? Him escaping Ultimate Custom Night isn't canon. Should I hold off on this and play Ultimate Custom Night myself, or are we okay with watching this? I'll leave that up to you guys. At one point, Shadow Freddy from 5 Nights at Freddy's 2 was acquired by William Afton. Ultimate Custom Night is Afton's Hell. Oh.
Fazbear Entertainment was dead.
There is no need for you to return to work next week,
Continue.
as Fazbear Entertainment is no longer a corporate entity.
All debts had been paid, all assets redistributed. The company was outright dissolved. Even the memories of the horrors that had happened there started to fade away in the public.
This is where he's gonna say, and they put all the animatronics in the Chuck E. Cheese's next door, and like, it doesn't matter. Like, yeah, they destroyed the building, but they moved all the metal to the next room or to the next building, because that seems to be the common factor here. It's like, good, they shut down the building, and they just moved everything into the next building. So don't worry, if the building was the haunted thing, that's been taken care of. If the animatronics are haunted, well, we're just gonna have to deal with that in the next 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 games.
Public consciousness. The people were gone too. William was dead. Henry was gone.
Oh,
a whole
thumb up.
generation of young Emilys and Aftons had lost their lives to the horrors of the pizzeria. All of them collateral damage to the man in the bunny suit. Everyone the
I know that thumb up
company
wasn't a
ever
reminder,
touched
but
was dead and gone. Well,
I'm gonna use it as a
except
reminder.
Pay your child support, you deadbeats! I'm keeping the diamond ring. I also set the house on fire!
Clara Afton. She'd been there in the early days, back when things with William were
Oh yeah, we
good.
don't hear
They'd
about
had
her.
the perfect home, a thriving
Ballerina.
business, the ideal family. But shortly after their youngest son died, things started to change. William had become distant, lost in his work, obsessive. She had watched him change from this irritatingly brilliant man that she had fallen in love with.
She
to a
wasn't any
drunken
better. She
monster
just
struggling to hold himself together.
She just
And
watched
despite
TV
her trying
apparently
to
when he
reach
was
out to him
home.
in those desperate days, he was just too far gone.
Admit it, you wanted to let me in.
For her sake, she had to leave the relationship, and from there she largely faded into obscurity. A mystery from William's past, a footnote in his history, and that was fine for her. She wanted to leave that part of her life behind. She tried to move forward, never wanting to hear the name Freddy Fazbear again. A time defined by mistakes.
The videos sent me is newer, some of the stuff might be
But then,
different. Yeah, I'm
paperwork started to
fully
arrive.
acknowledging that, like, there's probably like maybe 20% of these videos that aren't true because of just how the lore works.
Fazbear Entertainment began to close as a corporate entity. Suddenly her mail was flooded with notifications, requests, obligations. She had been there
She's
since the
spitting
beginning,
fire.
helping William in the early days of his business. And now, as a shareholder and sole living member of the Afton family, all copyrights and trademarks of both Afton Robotics and Fazbear Entertainment passed on to her.
She's rich!
Of this past life that she
Open another Fazbear joint!
Looking at the blueprints, the contracts, the memos, she felt old wounds begin to reopen. The regrets of a happy family that had been torn away from her. William had always been brilliant. That's what had attracted her to him in the first place. But he'd also been too blinded by obsession and pride. He was too jealous, too petty, too unable to actually see a bigger picture.
He's not jealous and petty. He's like, he's rightfully upset at that. Like, I'd be pissed too. Like, Frank is an asshole.
But now, holding the paperwork that contained decades of heartbreak
Except for the
trauma,
children
she
killing part.
realized
That part's
it was
wrong.
her turn.
I'll do
She
that.
was holding the power. This was her chance. And one thought resonated in her head. I will put them back together. I will put them all back together.
I know
She would be the one to rebuild this family. To rebuild the pieces of that shattered life. To reclaim the kids that Fazbear had stolen from her. But
Hey,
how?
Shark
Looking
Tank.
at William's work now laid out before her, she knew that he had been onto something. Collecting remnant, robotic humanoids, digital conscience transference. The pieces were all in place. They were just scattered, fragmented. It was almost like there were too many ideas going in too many different directions. It was such an important idea that she reiterated that point to herself. There were too many ideas going in too many different directions. That said, there had to be a way to save it all. She just needed to put it all back together. But
Start
how?
over.
To
Freddy.
rebuild her family, she would first need to rebuild the franchise that had stolen them away from her. With ownership over the characters, their licenses, the technology patents, and the Fazbear name, she converted the corporation back to an LLC.
This ruined me. Let's build it again.
A structure for smaller businesses that are usually family-owned.
Who is Frank? That's the
From
guy
there, she would
who
need
built the
Lots of
robots.
it. Remnant was the key.
Frank,
Clearly, in the
Ashley,
later years
I
of
think his
his
name was.
life, William had been using Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals as a remnant farm, sending robots to kids' birthday parties in the hopes of nabbing bits of the stuff here and there. But clearly, it wasn't enough. He had, what, like 4, maybe 5 animatronics going out every week? No. It was a decent idea, but to get the remnant they required, it needed scale. Dozens, hundreds of animatronics, all out there, all gathering remnant from unsuspecting customers. But to do that would
Melt
require
down all the
something
Chuck E. Cheeses.
William would never ask for. William had kept everything in-house. His obsession with control limited him.
Henry,
Claire, though,
that's his
She
name.
wasn't nearly that precious. A plan like this required partners, people outside of Fazbear to do the heavy lifting. So she contacted a mid-sized delivery company, DLZ Shipping Solutions, to help.
Okay, so here's a little bit of lore for everyone who's who might be new here. When I get a name wrong, it is 100% not a bit. I am terrible with names. You guys change your avatars, I get so lost. Please keep with the same avatars. Don't change it. I'm horrible with names. If Scrubs was here, she'd be yelling at me the entire time. I apologize. Yes, Henry. Henry Ashley is his name.
Build replicas of all the original animatronics. And with meal delivery apps being all the rage, why not an animatronic delivery service? Order one to celebrate your birthday, your Halloween party. How about a 4th of July picnic? We'll invite Liberty
This part might
Chica
not be
and
canon.
4th of July Freddy on over. She would make sure that they made skins for every occasion. Chocolate Bonnies for Easter, Shamrock Freddy's for St. Patrick's
Dang, she's
Day,
going off.
Dia de los Muertos Chicas.
Oh, I
And
like that.
thus, the Fazbear Funtime service was born.
That's right. With the Fazbear Fun Time service, you'll never be alone again. You'll always have someone watching your back.
Was it ridiculous?
Wait, hold on. Did you guys see that?
You'll never be alone again. You'll always.
That's Matt Pat. Not Matt Pat. That's the other guy. That's no, it's not Matt Pat. It's hi, it's me. It's Markiplier. It's Markiplier. That's Markiplier.
Always have someone watching your back.
Was it ridiculous? Absolutely. Was it a sellout? Pff, no doubt. It was exactly the sort of thing that William would have hated, but it needed to be done to get enough remnant. Normally, the novelty of ordering an animatronic wore off after like what, 1, maybe 2 times? But with new skins for new holidays, suddenly you had yourself
Oh my
an
gosh, they
animatronic
brought
perfect for
Fortnite
every occasion.
into
It would keep people
Freddy's.
hooked. It would keep them
Fortnite skins. Yes, Fortnite skins. Exactly.
Had to offer, and all the while they'd be collecting and returning the remnant back to her. In a word, it was brilliant. There was just one problem with it. No one trusted the Fazbear name. The company's brand was still mud in the public eye. No one would want to hire animatronics from the restaurant franchise known for murdering children. Nothing kills a party quite like the threat of death.
They don't murder
so
kids.
She needed to find
The
a way
people
to
in charge
discredit
murder
the stories
kids.
that had come before. She needed to win back the public's affections, reactivate some nostalgia for the spooky stories of their childhoods. She needed a game. Multiple games, in fact.
They lied to us. They lied to all of us. They told us that the whole point of this VR game was to undo the bad PR done by a rogue indie game developer. But that's not true at all. Those indie games were designed to conceal and make light of what happened. This isn't just
this
an
is
attempt to rebrand.
Help
It's an
Wanted.
elaborate cover-up.
Struggling game developers were a dime a dozen online, most
Yeah.
working on their magnum opus between shifts at the Dollar General. So she found
I
one.
get that.
Steve just picked him out of obscurity.
Steve, my boy.
Doofus willing to say and do anything for a couple extra bucks, and he fell right in line.
Same. Hey, if anyone wants to ever sponsor my streams, like $5.
As expected,
$5, $5.
stupid little things with dumb generic names like Mangle's Quest.
I'll say as long as it's not related to gambling, because I don't like this like CS:GO gambling. I don't like that. I don't like CS:GO gambling.
Toon Boy's Air Adventure, Five Nights at Freddy's. Bad gameplay.
AFK Arena and Raid Shadow Legends hit me up.
Done. People were suddenly talking about the clues inside of these things, searching for the hidden lore. They were actively making jokes about dead kids at pizzerias. Her husband's twisted history of serial murder had suddenly been reduced to a mere Nancy Drew mystery to be solved. The plan had worked. Freddy Fazbear's was suddenly more popular than ever.
Dang, she's smart.
Were going shockingly well. Her takeover and reboot of the franchise was full and complete. Suddenly infused with cash, she built the largest, most ambitious project yet, the Mega Pizzaplex. William had always been so visionary, but always thought so small scale. He was careful to a fault.
Pizzaplex.
Not her, though. She knew that this latest project needed to be big. It needed to be flashy.
Oh, but is this not true?
A palace for children. A place that got people talking and checking out the latest in
This
Fazbear
part is not canon.
products. So with a
Ah,
steady
that's a
supply of
shame. I want this to be
flowing in,
canon.
It was finally time. The stage was set. It was time to get to her real goal, literally rebuilding a family.
We're gonna finish watching this though. We owe it to Game
March
Theory.
2035. The first was obvious. The crying child, her little boy, the one that was the first to get ripped away from her. She'd seen down in his bunker that William had gotten very close to replicating artificial humans using animatronic technology. And so that's exactly what she
okay, and this is where the mimic comes into play. Okay, so this is where like the mimic starts like being like fed into the story.
Rebuild her boy from the ground up using robotic parts. His shaggy brown hair, his favorite striped shirt, even down to small details that no one would notice, like the band-aid on his left knee. Williams' research had even found ways of making animatronics that could bleed and process food, making them virtually indistinguishable from a typical human. He would never have any idea of what he actually was unless he was explicitly told. The only things that could possibly ruin the illusion were any overrides to his internal systems. If something were to, say, interfere with the cameras that he had in his eyes, or cause some sort of a core reboot to his hard drive, or x-ray his metallic bones, then yeah, he would be exposed. But otherwise, to the outside world, he was just your typical, normal human boy. She worked down in the bowels
Greg is still an animatronic, right? And like the lore, that didn't change. Greg's still a robot.
of the Pizzaplex giving him life. But it was one thing to build him, it was another to help him remember his identity. He died so young.
So read this. The FNaF 1 animatronics were remade, and they put the Mimic program, and the Mimic program was trained on the withered animatronics were haunted.
Early in their history,
FNaF
there was
1
no
animatronics
preserved
characters
memories,
being haunted
no
without being
documentation that she could just download into his
gotcha.
digital brain. So bit by bit, she trained him, forcing him to remember who he was. In a corner of the room, she even made a makeshift dinner table.
This is still a cool
reminder
theory,
of their
a
happier
game theory.
days. The family recreated 2 brothers, a sister, a father, and the mother at the head of the table. The one in charge, the one in command, the one bringing all of this to fruition. But his progress was admittedly slower than she would have liked. At first, he could only communicate through simple ones and zeros, then rudimentary drawings and crude letters. But bit by bit, images of his past life started to come through. Balloons, colors.
Nobody knows if Greg is a robot or real. He's a robot, I'm calling it.
Greg
his eyes like do the
As the
glitchy
robot
thing.
boy
What's her
embraced
name?
she felt a warmth.
Lola runs past him.
This was the joy that she'd been working towards. This was what it was all for. Her son, back in her arms again. The plan was working. She had to keep going. Next was William. If the family was truly going to be put together, she would need him. And she knew exactly where he was, in the ruins of that old Freddy Fazbear's pizza place where Henry had trapped him. In fact, that's specifically why she insisted on building the Pizzaplex there over the sinkhole. It was the best place to hide what her true intentions were with the entire operation. Digging through the wreckage,
so she knows
found him.
that
he was right where
he's
she
down
thought
there.
he'd be. Seeing the putrid shell of the Springtrap suit, though, was not something she was prepared for. The rotting corpse of William Afton was disgusting.
I would pee on it.
Scorched flesh fused into the fur lining. Hollow black sockets where eyes once were. A smell that reeked of burned carbon and bloody iron. He was no longer flesh. He was just the tangled sinews of a creature that was once called human. How far this brilliant man had fallen. It was clear that her work was cut out for her on this one. Afton was practically lifeless. The man may not have been able to die, but he was about as close as you could come.
Just give him an give him a Gatorade. That's electrolytes is what they need.
Arms and endoskeleton reinforcements were the top priority. Maybe pulled from their new line of glam rock animatronics. She'd have to see if they had any spare Bonnie parts lying around that they could steal. In the meantime, though, she threw the husk that was once her husband into a life support pod infused with aerosolized remnant to help keep him stable. But more important than recovering his body was recovering his mind. In his current state, he was comatose, an empty shell. Severe brain damage starts at temperatures over 108 degrees Fahrenheit. 42 degrees Celsius, and years of repeated fires had burned his brain to goo. Gone was the brilliant,
and my brain's just like that.
mind that had drawn her to him in the first place. But
I think I'm in a relatively cool
Unlike
place.
her darling boy Gregory, Afton had found ways to record his consciousness. Fundamentally, the brain
That's
is
the
only
mimic,
a series
not
of
William.
electrical connections after all, so why couldn't you replicate that in the form of a standard circuit board? In essence, you could create a digital consciousness. And one thing she knew about William, he was nothing if not cautious. A planner. Someone who had backup plans to his backup plans. And sure enough, there it was. Buried in piles of old animatronic CPUs, a record of Afton.
This woman's a genius, man.
But she needed
this woman is so good at like if this theory was the true thing, this woman is amazing at marketing. And the fact that like her husband was just sleeping on this, like what was she doing the entire time they were like living together? She's just like, oh yeah, honey, that's great. Yeah, you talk about Ashley, and like I love how you two are doing all that. Yeah, starting up Facebook accounts, that's a great idea. When really she's sitting here like, these fools, they could do so much more. We can make theme parks based around these animatronics. We can make movies, sell books.
Tested.
Someone was definitely here during the night. It had to have been the client. I mean, they sent us that stuff in the first place with no explanation, told us to scan it, said it would expedite the process so we wouldn't need to program any pathfinding ourselves.
Unlike the other games that she'd paid to have made in the past, this one had a different purpose. This wasn't about PR, it was about getting William back up and running, spreading his virus to the masses.
You acknowledge that Fazbear Entertainment is not responsible for accidental digital consciousness transference, real-world manifestations.
Yeah, true. She actually did like real detective groundwork where it kind of feels like Michael just stumbled upon like what happened.
She hired a new developer, Silver Parasol Games, to scan the boards and bring her husband into the system. And because of the immersive nature of VR, William's consciousness would be able to merge with the player, giving him a new body, a new agency.
Uppercut him the moment I saw him.
Afton's hold wasn't as powerful as she had hoped. He wasn't able to gain complete control. The first trial run, Jeremy, was so desperate to escape from his grasp that he sliced his own face off with a paper shredder. Messy. Afton's followers were reluctant, to say the least. But it was the second attempt that looked like it had the potential to kill two birds with one stone. Enter Vanessa. Mrs. Afton wanted a surrogate daughter. Her darling Elizabeth would have been a young woman at this point if she had lived.
But she looked like her daughter.
Someone who wasn't Elizabeth but could be just like her. Could she have just rebuilt her like Gregory? Sure, but she decided against it because she wanted an actual human mother-daughter connection. Well, that, and it would be redundant and narratively unsatisfying to have two robot kids in the same family. What could she say? William had put a lot of tools on the table for her to use, and she was planning on using them all. Plus, Elizabeth had always been so loyal to Daddy. It was time to give her a second chance, a true choice. And Vanessa seemed to be
still
the
not
perfect
canon.
candidate
Damn it!
to fill the role.
Your dad's name was Bill? Your dad didn't play fair, did he? He used to make your mum look bad in court. He manipulated you. I know your mum after she lost the custody case. I was supposed to be a good girl.
She started as a QA tester at Silver Parasol Games, the VR game development company that was part of her plan to bring back William. But more importantly, Vanessa checked all the correct boxes.
Green eyes, blonde hair.
Blonde, green eyes with a fondness for flowers and the outdoors. In many ways, it was her daughter all...
I'm sorry, when did that... So, on your resume here, I don't see anything about liking flowers. Do you like flowers? Oh yeah, I like flowers. Oh, good. We'll just write that in. You're hired.
Except it wasn't just looks and personality. What really mattered was Vanessa's mind. Underconfident, coming from a broken home, motherless, able to be manipulated. Yes. she would do nicely. She would be the one to save dear old Daddy, just as the real Elizabeth would have wanted.
I will make you proud, Daddy.
While testing the VR game, William's digital consciousness merged with Vanessa. Oh sure, she fought, fragmenting Afton's code into a series of tapes hidden across the game, trying to do web searches to regain control over her life, but it wasn't enough.
Exactly.
She was weaker than Jeremy. She was a thrall that, despite occasional moments of lucidity, had to obey. And with Vanessa, it was a 2-for-1 deal. She was getting a daughter back, while also bringing her husband one step closer to reactivation. She just had to make sure that Vanessa was headed the right way.
Man, that would leave me
Gregory
confused,
was an expert
like,
hacker, part of the benefits
sexually.
of being an Afton and a robot.
Oh,
so
hey,
Claire
honey.
had him keeping tabs on Vanessa.
Oh, no, you're my daughter today? Oh, hey, daughter, what's up?
Sessions to ensure the future Elizabeth was falling in line. If any of the therapists started to ask too many questions, they were promptly dismissed from their positions. And while Gregory kept tabs on Vanessa's personal life, Mrs. Afton made sure to clear a path for her professionally. With Silver Parasol's collapse at the hands of the Anomaly, she then had the possessed Vanessa bring the contaminated circuit boards to DLZ shipping and the Fazbear Funtime service. More glitches, more Remnant, more Afton. But it was her last move that was the best. In a true masterpiece of poetry, she brought Vanessa over to be chief security officer at the Pizzaplex. A true family tradition to don the hat and badge. And all it took was a recommendation from the top, as well as some emails marked.
He is also a security guard. I didn't think about
have
that.
relevant experience for the job, but
it
when
runs
it
in
comes
the blood.
directly from the CEO, does it really matter? Husband, son, daughter, a corpse, a robot, a human. All that was left was Michael. Poor, troubled Michael. The boy that killed her youngest. The one that would spend years trying to make his guilt.
You have a theory, and Help Wanted is like the Vanny Mask, and Help Wanted 2. The VR is a fixed version of the prototype pizzeria and secret. It's likely because it's the same assets. Interesting.
See conscience right again. A self-professed protector. While she knew she needed him to complete the family, something told her that the problem had already solved itself. Something had shifted when using Glamrock Freddy to excavate the buried pizza place.
I have been here before. I found myself for the first time when I cleared the path. I have changed. My friends are here, but I can protect you.
I am not me.
Me.
I
Maybe
go
it was
as
the
hard.
remnant that had coursed through Michael's veins. Maybe it was the spirit of Michael living on as a protector, but he was there, somewhere inside of Glamrock Freddy. She could feel it. And just like that, she'd won. She'd done it. Sure, there were still some kinks to work out.
Yay, family's back together!
Vanessa, some rehabilitation of William, but they were there. Finally, all together again under one roof. The Aftons reunited. A happy ending. And that's how it could have ended. That's how it should have ended, had it not been for a few unanticipated developments. For one, something was just wrong with the Pizzaplex. Almost as if the entire building was haunted, possessed. Puppet plushies hiding in the ceilings, behind crates, places that they had no earthly way of belonging. Staff bots with greasy tears down their eyes acting like they were being puppeteered by some sort of a nightmare. Even their sounds had the echo of nightmares long past.
Yeah, I didn't like those.
It was as though a guardian spirit of the past refused to move on. As long as her husband was around, it too would linger. Only now, it wasn't just in one body, but it was in the essence of the building itself. She had seen stories of houses built on burial grounds getting possessed by angry spirits, but she'd never assumed.
Just throw some holy water on it.
Then again, in a world of living spirit metal and mind-controlling glitches,
you'll short-circuit them or cleanse them.
The whole thing was ridiculous. Why would this be the line that she refused to cross? After all, the Pizzaplex was built over the burial ground of angry spirits, but it was the power cords that finally convinced her that something was wrong. Suddenly, these cords were striped black and white, like the security
I remember this.
generations ago. The very foundations of this place, the materials and wires that constituted it, were rebelling against her, against the Aftons, against the
I remember
quest
hearing about
to
the
bring
black
them
and white
all
stripes.
together again. And it was being helped by something else, something slithering through the building. Maybe they were connected, she couldn't be sure, but a blob of living wires could be heard oozing through the walls, stealing pieces and parts of the old animatronics showcased in Rockstar Row. She could only assume that it was a byproduct of all the remnant they'd been collecting. From Afton's testing, she knew that both light and dark remnant existed, one of positive emotions and the other created from anguish, anger, agony. Perhaps this thing was
The
an
amalgamation
amalgamation
of
of all
negative.
the darkest parts of the pizzeria's history. A collection of the hatred still housed inside these
He killed
defunct
me way
endomorph
too many
skeletons and
times.
exosuits. As long as it was left alone, it seemed to be harmless. But if any Afton outside of Michael got too close,
I died like
lashed
100 times to that
wildly.
thing.
Even young Gregory, looking to punish the family that had been complicit in its horrible creation. Little did she know, though, that Gregory should have been her biggest concern. That bringing the family together would have some unforeseen consequences. Gregory was normally the goodest of boys. She had literally built him that way. But lately, he'd been disappearing more and more often, disobeying her orders. Requests. She knew that he loved playing on the arcade machines once the Pizzaplex closed, being so good as to top the leaderboard on practically all of them. But lately, he was nowhere to be found. She suspected his absence had to do with Glamrock Freddy's failed performance the other night, when he malfunctioned live on stage. Almost as though the core programming of Freddy responded to seeing this rebuilt small boy. Almost like it awakened something inside of him. She'd have to make sure that Vanessa was on the lookout for him. But she'd soon come to learn that Vanessa wasn't enough. Whether it was the influence of the nightmare puppet or a reawakened hatred of
So she sent the other
seated
animatronics
deep
to
in
go grab
Gregory's
him?
code, something had caused him to rebel, to rip apart each animatronic in the Pizzaplex. Bit by bit, this boy was tearing down the empire that she'd so painstakingly built, freeing Vanessa from her mind control, destroying the remains of Afton in the basement, setting Glamrock Freddy loose. As her carefully created world crumbled around her one more time, she began to plot her revenge. She would have to bring them all to ruin. And there you have it, my friends. Nearly a
the
decade
game,
in the making,
Ruin.
my FNaF timeline for where the franchise.
Okay, we still have time. And it looks like he's just going to go over proof of concepts here. So we're going to go ahead and... we already liked it. That was a great video. Where's the one that I got sent? The entire FNaF timeline, full story. Oh man, we should have watched this first, I guess. We watch this another day? Hold on. Let's do this.
Get ready for a surprise!
She can sing.
This one's just an hour long. So if we watch it for an hour straight, with pauses, it's going to be about an hour and 30 minutes. Do I have time for that? I don't know if I have time for that right now. We can watch this again another day. Maybe next, maybe next Sunday we can watch this. But I still want to play, like, horror games. So maybe we hold off on this for, like, 2 weeks, and we watch this. Because my brain is so stupid, I'm going to forget, like, 30% of what happened in this one, and we're going to have to, like, watch this one. I'm going to be like, oh my gosh, that's fascinating. I don't remember hearing about this. And it's going to be like, no, yeah, you played as Afton in the second game. That was Afton. Alright. Oh, wait, Griefs. What's up, girl? Why? If it's about the game that you recommended, I have it on my wish list, and I can buy it. Actually, I should buy it now if I want to, but we'll hold off on playing it until Thursday? Wednesday? Thursday? Thursday. There's one more game you've fallen in love with. Moonstone Island. That sounds familiar. I'd pull up my Steam, but my Steam might have nudie pics on it, because Steam, for some reason, has a lot of adult games in the popular up-and-coming and new and trending. Into the Pit isn't canon 2. Really? What's the point of having a story if you're just gonna, like, let anyone do whatever they want with it? Alright, well, I think we're done watching for the day. I'll let you guys get back to it. You all have a... Watch your theory. What theory? Watch my theory. What theory? I'll give you a minute to type it out while I just talk about random things. D&D is pretty much ready to go for next Saturday. I'm excited for that. So on Saturday, instead of doing a live stream, we're going to miss out on Saturday. I will release a video on Saturday for Fear and Hunger. It'll be 2 parts in one. The one you said earlier. Are you talking about Glamrock Freddy was Michael Afton? The old yellow Bonnie costume that was in the 70s later became Vanny in Security Breach. Ew. That sounds like it would smell. Alright, guys. Thank you for showing up. I will see you guys next time. We might stream tomorrow. Monday, Tuesdays are always, like, up in the air if I stream. There's some days I just want to, like game with my friends and relax and maybe work on projects for YouTube. But the projects never really work out too well. I want to do, like, this hide-and-seek video, but I need to work up the courage to ask everyone to record it and then figure out how they can send me, like, an hour-long recording so I can shrink it down. No, I don't. Where's the? I don't see. Hellacious Gamer, watch your theory. Hellacious Gamer, your comment might have been auto-modded because I don't see it anywhere. Anyways, I'll see you guys. Goodbye! I guess I don't need to. Emoji.